The bank charged his dead wife $44 a month for 6 years. And not one person at First Meridian thought Dale Ostrowski was keeping count. What happens when a quiet man with a green notebook walks into federal court? The lawyer called at 6:47 in the morning. That was the first sign something had gone wrong on his end. His name was Hargrove. He billed $450 an hour and had the kind of voice that tried to sound calm and never quite got there. He said there was a compliance flag on Dale Ostrowski's account. He said the bank's review team had found something. He said the word problem twice in 30 seconds, which told Dale everything he needed to know about how Hargrove's night had gone. Dale was already in the kitchen, coffee going. Same mug since 1994, the one with the chipped handle Ruth had glued back together and called perfectly fine. He let Hargrove talk. The account in question was a joint checking account ending in 7741. It had been held under two names, Dale Ostrowski and Ruth Ostrowski, since 1987. Ruth had died in June of 2013. 3 weeks after the funeral, in July of 2013, the account had been charged $44, then $44 again in August, then September, then every month after that for 6 straight years, 72 charges. $3,168 pulled from an account held in the name of a woman who had been dead the entire time. Hargrove said it was a glitch. He said the compliance team was looking into it. He said they would get it sorted. Dale picked up his coffee. He already knew about every single charge. He had known about them since the first one hit. Go back to 1996, a Tuesday in October, cold enough that breath showed in the air. The Medina County Courthouse Annex had a side room with folding tables and fluorescent lights and a coffee pot that had been burned down to the last quarter inch. 4 people stood around the table, a county clerk with a clipboard, 2 men Dale didn't know, and a man named Royce Pittman, who ran Pittman Development out of an office in Akron and drove a white Escalade and wore a watch that cost more than Dale's truck. The county was auctioning off a strip of land nobody wanted, 12 feet wide, just over half a mile long. Parcel 1407B on the county tax map. It ran along the eastern edge of Route 18 just north of the Granger Township line. It had been county-owned right-of-way since a road expansion was proposed in 1961. The expansion was never built. The corridor sat on the books for 35 years, generating no revenue, costing the county a small administrative fee every cycle to keep it classified. The county wanted it gone. The opening bid was $400. Dale bid $400. Royce Pittman looked at him. He was the kind of man who looked at people the way you look at something that has wandered into the wrong room. He looked at Dale's coat, which was old. He looked at Dale's boots, which were muddy. He looked at the clipboard the county clerk was holding, which showed the parcel dimensions, which were 12 feet by 812 feet, which was the kind of measurement that made a man like Pittman smile. He bid $450. Dale bid $500. Pittman laughed, not a polite laugh, not a laugh he tried to hide. An out-loud laugh, the kind a man makes when he wants the room to hear it. He bid $550 and turned back to the coffee pot. Dale bid $600. The county clerk looked between them. Pittman turned back around. He looked at Dale again. He said out loud to no one in particular, "You understand this is a 12-foot strip of grass next to a ditch, right?" Dale said nothing. He bid $650. Pittman stared for a moment, then looked at his watch, then looked at the clerk, and shook his head once. Too small to matter. Not worth 5 more minutes of a Tuesday morning, the clerk called it. Dale Ostrowski, $650. Parcel 1407B. The clerk printed the receipt. Dale folded it in half and put it in his coat pocket. Pittman was already walking toward the door. He said something to the other man beside him, something Dale couldn't fully hear, and the other man smiled. They left without looking back. The room went quiet. The fluorescent light above the coffee pot buzzed once and held. Ruth was at the kitchen table when Dale got home. She was grading papers. She taught 4th grade at Granger Elementary, and she brought her work home every Tuesday night and spread it across the table under the good lamp. She looked up when he came in. She asked how it went. He set his coat on the hook by the door. "Fine," he said. She looked at him the way she had looked at him for 9 years of marriage. The way that meant she knew there was more, and she would wait until he was ready. He got himself a glass of water and sat across from her. He said he'd bought a small parcel. He said it was narrow. He said it cost $650. She asked him what he was going to do with a 12-foot strip of land. He said he wasn't sure yet. That was not entirely true. Ruth looked at him one more moment, then looked back at her papers. She trusted him the way her father had trusted the ground, completely and without needing to know the reason every time. Dale did not tell her what he had seen in the county engineer's office 3 weeks before the auction. He had gone in on a Friday afternoon to pull the original 1961 road expansion file. A clerk had brought it out in a manila folder that had not been opened in over a decade. The folder had 2 documents inside. The first was the original right-of-way proposal. The second was a resolution from 1963 that was supposed to formally cancel the project and reclassify the corridor. The resolution had never been signed. It had been stamped, it had been filed, it had a case number. But the signature line, the one that would have made the cancellation official under Ohio Revised Code, the one that would have legally dissolved the corridor and returned the parcel to general county ownership with no deed restrictions, was blank, which meant parcel 1407B was not just a 12-foot strip of grass beside a ditch. It was a strip of land with a 33-year-old legal question attached to it, a question nobody at the county had thought to ask. A question nobody at Pittman Development had thought to ask either. Dale had thought to ask it. He'd asked it 3 weeks before the auction, standing in a county records room with a manila folder and a clerk who was already thinking about lunch. He'd written one line in his notebook that night. Corridor not dissolved. Check what's east of Route 18. Pittman was still laughing when Dale drove home. That was fine. Dale had the receipt in his coat pocket. He had the notebook on the passenger seat. And he had a question nobody else in Medina County was asking yet. Think you know where this is going? You don't. Hit subscribe and stay locked in, because what Dale found in that library 3 weeks later is the last thing Royce Pittman ever expected anyone to find. October 18, 1996, Medina County Public Library, reading room, back table, third chair from the window. Dale set down a folded county road map and opened a bound volume of Ohio Department of Transportation records from 1958 to 1966. He did not ask the librarian for help. He had already been here twice that week, Mrs. Coates, who had worked the reference desk since 1989, noticed him but did not approach. He was the kind of reader who knew what he was looking for, which was different from the kind who needed to be shown. He found the original Route 18 expansion proposal on page 211 of the 1961 ODOT volume. He read it slowly. The state had planned to widen Route 18 by 2 lanes north of the Granger line. The right-of-way acquisition had been mapped and surveyed in 1961. The county had filed the corridor that same year under parcel 1407B, a strip 12 feet wide and 2,812 feet long. The state's plan was to fold the county corridor into a wider state-controlled expansion once funding cleared. Funding never cleared. The state canceled its portion in 1962. The county filed a resolution to cancel its own corridor in 1963. Dale already knew that resolution had never been signed. What he did not yet know was what sat on the other side of the corridor. He turned back to the map. He ran his finger east from Route 18, past the ditch, past parcel 14007B, which was his strip 12 feet wide running half a mile north. And then, sitting right behind it like something placed there by accident, was a block of land that had not been labeled in 1961 because it had not needed to be labeled. It was farmland, Granger Township, agricultural use. No road access from the west except across the county corridor because a drainage easement filed in 1954 blocked a separate western access lane that had been considered and rejected. The only way to reach that land from Route 18 was across parcel 1407B. Dale stared at the map for a long time. He turned back to the ODOT records. Found the drainage easement filing from 1954. Read the legal description. Read it again. The easement was permanent. It had never been released. He wrote one number in his notebook, 280. That was the acreage of the farmland sitting east of his strip. Then he wrote a second number, 12. That was the width in feet of the only legal access to those 280 acres. He closed the notebook and held it in both hands for a moment. Then he drove home. Ruth had the kettle on when he got in. He came to the kitchen table and spread the photocopy of the county map flat. She brought 2 mugs over and set one near his elbow and looked at the map the way she looked at things she was trying to understand without asking too many questions. She pointed at the thin line running north along Route 18. That yours, she said. Yes, he said. She looked at the block east of it, the 280 acres, then back at the thin line. She says, that the only way in? He said, far as I can find. She picked up her mug. She did not ask anything else. He looked at the map for a while longer. Then he folded it and put it under the notebook. He started watching the land in spring of 1997, not in a way anyone would notice. He drove Route 18 on his way to work, and he drove it on his way home. Most days there was nothing to see. Frost-hard ground in January, mud in March, corn in June, soybeans in August, brown stalks in November. The kind of land that looked like every other piece of flat Ohio farmland along every other county road. But Dale was watching the edges. In April of 1997, he saw fresh tire tracks on the access lane that ran east off Route 18 just south of his strip. Deep tread, wide wheelbase, survey truck. He noted it in his notebook, date and description. In September of 1997, he saw 4 orange survey flags pressed into the ground along the eastern boundary of the 280-acre parcel. The kind of flags that precede a property assessment. He noted those too. In March of 1998, the Medina County Recorder's Office posted a property transfer. The 280-acre parcel, 6 separate tax parcels assembled into one, had been acquired by a limited liability company called Granger East Holdings LLC, registered in Delaware, for $1.4 million. Dale looked up Granger East Holdings in the State Business Registry. The registered agent's address was the same office park in Akron where Royce Pittman Development had its suite. Dale wrote the LLC name in his notebook, wrote the date of transfer, wrote 14M, wrote the Akron address. Then he drew a small arrow from the LLC name to the thin line representing his strip of land. One word under the arrow: bottleneck. He kept tracking. Through 1998 and 1999, he watched permits get pulled at the county. Granger East Holdings applied for a preliminary site assessment on the 280 acres. The application noted planned commercial development and cited expected road access via Route 18. It did not specify how that access would be obtained. Dale pulled the application and read the access language 3 times. They had assumed the corridor would be available. They had assumed parcel 1407B, the 12-foot strip, was still county-owned right-of-way available to be purchased or condemned or simply used as a public corridor once the project broke ground. They had not checked the tax records. If they had checked the tax records, they would have seen that parcel 1407B had been transferred out of county ownership in October of 1996. They would have seen a new owner listed on the Medina County Auditor's rolls. They would have seen a name and an address. They would have seen Dale Ostrowski's name. Dale had been paying the annual tax bill on the strip since 1996, $18 a year, never late. He kept the receipts in the same folder as the original deed. 72 months of tax receipts, running the same direction as the $44 bank charges. He had always understood that careful records were the same thing as patient power. He went back to the library one more time in January of 2000. He pulled the Granger East Holdings permit file and the original 1961 corridor documents side by side. He looked at the unsigned 1963 resolution. He looked at the deed transfer from 1996. He looked at the drainage easement from 1954, the one that blocked the alternate western access. 3 documents, 3 separate filings, 3 separate offices 35 years apart, none of them connected in anyone's records. Connected only in Dale's notebook. He turned to a fresh page, he drew the strip, he drew the 280 acres. He drew the drainage easement. He drew the Route 18 frontage. Then he drew one small square at the north end of the strip and labeled it 14-07B Ostrowski. He sat with the drawing for a long time. Royce Pittman had paid $1.4 million for 280 acres of landlocked ground. He just didn't know it yet. Dale closed the notebook, drove home, paid the $18 tax bill that was sitting on the kitchen counter, put the receipt in the folder. A man knocked on the front door on a Saturday morning in April of 2001. Young, clean coat, clipboard. The kind of smile that had been practiced enough to look easy but hadn't quite got there. His name was Brett, he said. He was with a real estate firm out of Akron. He said he represented an investment group that was interested in the small parcel Dale owned along Route 18. He said the group had authorized him to offer $18,000 for immediate transfer of parcel 1407B. $18,000 for a 12-foot strip of grass that had cost $650. Brett smiled like that was the end of the conversation. Dale looked at him for a moment. He thanked him. He said no. Brett's smile held. He said the group had flexibility. He said he could go back and make a case for something higher. Dale said he understood. He said no again. Brett left the way polished people leave when they are confused, slowly glancing back once. Dale closed the door. He wrote $18,000 in his notebook, wrote Brett and the date, wrote the Akron firm's name from the business card Brett had pressed into his hand. He put the card in the folder. Ruth was at the table when he came back to the kitchen. She had heard the door. She asked who it was. Dale said a man from Akron. She looked at him. How much? $18,000, he said. She looked at her coffee for a moment. Then she said, is it enough? No, he said. She nodded once. That was the whole conversation. She had trusted him since 1987. She was not going to stop trusting him because a man with a clipboard had shown up before breakfast. Their daughter Janet was 12 that year. She had asked about the strip once, driving home from school in March, looking out the window at the survey flags Dale had planted to mark the northern boundary. She had said, Dad, why do you keep that piece? He had said, because it's ours. She had thought about that for a moment. Then she said, but it's so small. He had said, sometimes small is exactly the right size. She had turned back to the window. She did not ask again. She would remember that answer for 22 years. The second offer came in the fall of 2004. Not a knock at the door. A phone call, formal and measured, from a man who identified himself as a representative of the Medina County Economic Development Office. He said the county had become aware of a planned commercial corridor on the Granger East parcel. He said the county had a strong interest in seeing the access issue resolved. He said the county was prepared to initiate a purchase or conditional use negotiation for parcel 1407B at an appraised value of $47,000. $47,000. They said thanked him. The man on the phone paused. He said he wanted to be clear that the county had legal tools available if voluntary purchase wasn't possible. He said the word condemnation in the same neutral tone a man uses when he is not quite ready to use it as a threat, but wants the other person to know it exists. Dale said he understood. He said no thank you. He wrote $47,000 in the notebook date. County Economic Development. He wrote the word condemnation and put a question mark next to it. Then he pulled out the 1961 corridor file, the one with the unsigned 1963 resolution, and read it again. Parcel 1407B had originally been county right-of-way. It had been proposed for cancellation in 1963. The resolution had not been signed. But even if the county wanted to argue the corridor had never legally been conveyed, even if they tried to claim it still carried a right-of-way status from 1961, the tax record told a different story. The county had taxed Dale Ostrowski for the parcel every year since 1997. You cannot tax a man for land you claim is still public right-of-way. That was not a small contradiction. That was the contradiction. He put the folder back. He paid the $18 tax bill. On time, as always. Somewhere in Akron, Royce Pittman was not having a good year. Granger East Holdings had carried $1.4 million in land at carrying cost since 1998. The commercial development they had planned required road access. Road access required parcel 1407B. Parcel 1407B was owned by a man in Granger Township who answered the phone politely and said no. The LC's attorney, a man named Welch, who wore suits that cost more than some cars, had prepared a memo in 2003 outlining the legal options. Condemnation, adverse possession, prescriptive easement claims, title dispute based on the 1963 unsigned resolution. Each option had a problem. Condemnation required the county to act, and the county's own tax records undermined any claim that the corridor was still public. Adverse possession required proving continuous open use of the strip for 21 years. Nobody had used it. Prescriptive easement required the same. The 1963 resolution argument was possible, but if they filed it, Dale's attorney could produce 38 years of tax receipts, showing the county had always treated the parcel as private property. The county itself would not want to be in court arguing both sides of its own records. Welch told Pittman he needed to buy the strip. Pittman told Welch to find a number the man would take. Welch came himself the third time, September 2008. Three-piece suit, leather briefcase. He called ahead, which was different from Brett with the clipboard. Dale told him to come on Tuesday. Dale put the kettle on. Welch sat at the kitchen table and opened his briefcase and laid a single document down, an offer sheet. Clean type, county seal in the corner, the Granger East Holdings name at the top. The number was $310,000. He did not slide it across the table. He turned it so Dale could read it and left it there. Dale read it. He looked at the number. He looked at Welch. He said, "I appreciate you coming out." Welch said he understood this was a significant parcel for the family. He said his client had a long-term vision for the area. He said $310,000 was a fair and complete price that reflected both the parcel's assessed value and a substantial goodwill premium. Dale said, "That's a fair number." Welch straightened slightly. Dale said, "But I'm not selling." Welch set down his pen. He said he was not sure Dale understood the full picture. He said the development project was projected to generate significant county tax revenue. He said there were parties with a long-term interest in seeing this resolved. Dale said he understood. Welch said, "Is there a number?" Dale said he hadn't found one. Welch stood. He picked up the offer sheet. He put it back in his briefcase, which took him a moment because his hands were not entirely steady. He thanked Dale for the coffee. Dale walked him to the door. Ruth watched from the hallway. After Welch's car pulled out, she came to the kitchen and sat across from Dale. She said, $300,000, Dale." He said, "I know." She looked at him the way she had looked at him since 1996. Not doubting, just checking. He said, "It's not time yet." She put her hand flat on the table for a moment. Then she picked up her mug. She trusted him. She always had. He mowed the strip twice a year, spring and fall, kept the corner markers clear, paid the tax bill every spring, $18 on time, same as always. The strip sat quiet beside Route 18 and the world drove past it and forgot it was there. Pittman didn't forget. Welch didn't forget. But they had run out of approaches and they were not ready to admit it yet. On a Wednesday morning in March 2019, Dale's phone rang. He was in the kitchen. He looked at the screen. An Akron number he didn't have stored, but he had seen it before. He had written it in the notebook in 2008, next to Welch's name, in case he needed it. He picked up the phone. He did not answer yet. He looked out the window at the strip of land running beside Route 18 in the gray March light. Half a mile of 12-foot grass, $650 in 1996, $18 a year every year since. He set down his coffee. He answered. Welch's voice came through flat and careful. Mr. Ostrowski, we'd like to discuss a new arrangement. Dale said, all right, not a question, not an invitation. 2 words that said he was listening and nothing else. Welch said his client had reconsidered the nature of the transaction. He said they were prepared to move away from a purchase offer and discuss a long-term easement agreement instead. A permanent right of access across parcel 1407B. He said the compensation structure was flexible. He said, and here his voice changed slightly, we believe we can make this worth your time. Dale said he would have his daughter call him. Welch paused, then said, your daughter. Dale said, she's a property lawyer, Columbus. A longer pause. Dale said, she'll call by Friday. He hung up. Janet drove up that Saturday. She had the permit file in a folder on the passenger seat. She had pulled the Granger East Holdings corporate registration, the LLC structure, the chain of title on the 280 acres, and the most recent development permit application, which had been submitted in January 2019 and had listed, without documentation, public right-of-way access via Route 18 corridor as the ingress point. She spread everything across the kitchen table next to Dale's notebook and the original deed. She read for 40 minutes. When she looked up, she said, Dad, they filed a permit claiming right-of-way access across land you've owned and paid taxes on for 23 years. Dale said, I know. She said they were going to build without resolving this. He said, I know. She sat back. She looked at the notebook, all 71 pages. Then she looked at the folder of $18 tax receipts, one for every year since 1997. She said, you kept everyone. He said, your mother gave me the folder. Janet pressed her hand flat on the table, the same way Ruth used to. She called Welch on Monday. Welch's challenge came fast. Granger East Holdings filed a quiet title action in Medina County Common Pleas in April 2019. The claim was that parcel 1407B had originated as a public right-of-way corridor in 1961 and had never been legally conveyed to private ownership because the 1963 cancellation resolution, while unsigned, had created a cloud on title sufficient to void the 1996 auction transfer. In other words, Pittman's lawyers were arguing Dale had never legally owned the strip at all. The hearing was on a Thursday in September. Janet placed 3 documents on the table in front of the judge. The first was the original 1961 corridor filing. She showed the judge that the corridor had been created as a county right-of-way, pending a state expansion that was canceled by the state in 1962. The county's own 1963 resolution had attempted to formally dissolve the corridor. The resolution was unsigned, she acknowledged that, but she pointed the judge to Ohio Revised Code, Section 5553.04, which required that right-of-way corridors not formally dissolved within 5 years of their originating project's cancellation revert to taxable private property status by default. The state project had been canceled in 1962. 5 years was 1967. The parcel had been taxable private property since 1967 by operation of law. The county had begun taxing it accordingly. She placed the second document down. 23 years of tax records paid by Dale Ostrowski every year on time, $18, beginning 1997. And before that, she said, the county taxed the parcel itself. She laid down a second set of records showing the county had charged itself a nominal administrative fee on the parcel every year from 1967 forward, treating it in its own books as a taxable parcel, not public right-of-way. The third document was the 1996 deed transfer, signed, recorded, stamped by the county recorder. If this parcel had never been legally available for sale, she said, then the county had committed fraud in its own auction. That was Granger East Holdings' argument. She asked the judge whether he believed that was the stronger claim. The judge looked at all 3 documents. He ruled in 4 minutes. The quiet title action was dismissed. Parcel 1407B belonged to Dale Ostrowski and had belonged to him since October 1996. Welch reached for his phone before the gavel finished coming down. Janet called Dale that evening. He was on the front porch with his coffee. She said, it's done. They want to negotiate. He said, I know they do. She said, what terms? He said, monthly payment, permanent easement, transfers to you when I'm gone. No lump sum. She said, they'll push back. He said, let them. They pushed back twice. Once on the transfer clause, once on the inflation adjustment. Janet held both times. Welch accepted every term on a Wednesday afternoon in November. The monthly easement payment was $300, adjusted every 5 years for inflation. Transferable to Janet Ostrowski upon Dale's death, in perpetuity as long as Granger East Holdings or any successor entity used the access corridor. $3,100 every month, for the rest of his life and beyond. The signing was at the Medina County Clerk's office on a Friday morning in December. Dale drove himself. He parked the truck on the street. He went in with the notebook under his arm. He signed the easement agreement. He signed the amended deed filing. He thanked the clerk. He walked back to the truck. He opened the notebook to the last blank page. He wrote one line, "Deck 2019 settled." Ruth was right. He put the notebook on the passenger seat, drove home. Royce Pittman read about the agreement in the Medina Gazette. A small item on page 8. He did not comment. He did not call anyone. He folded the paper and set it down and did not pick it back up. The 4 people who had stood in that courthouse annex in 1996, the clerk, the 2 men Dale never knew, and Pittman, 3 of them were still alive. None of them said anything either. There was nothing to say. The man they had laughed at had folded a receipt into his coat pocket and waited 23 years. Ruth had to put the kettle on every time. The morning the first offer came, the day Welch sat at the table. The night Janet spread the permit file across the kitchen. Every time Dale said no, and every time he said nothing at all, Ruth had put the kettle on and trusted him. She had died 6 years before the settlement. The bank had charged her $44 a month for every one of those years, on top of everything else. The monthly easement payment started in January 2020. $300, first business day of every month, direct deposit. Granger East Holdings to Dale Ostrowski. 70 times the $44 the bank had taken, every single month. Some men fight for what they own. Dale Ostrowski just kept paying the tax bill. Now here's the question. If Welch had come to your door with $310,000 in 2008, would you have taken it, or would you have said no and kept waiting? Drop it in the comments. And if this story hit different, you know what to do, because the next one is even quieter, and the ending hits even harder.